So I'm just to you. You can stay there.
Okay.
We can both be here because we're vaccinated and masked.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, first of all, I want to say hello to everybody here in the room. It's so nice of you to come out on a Friday to the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. And it's a kind of a first here too, and you will say more about it. The pandemic isn't over.
Yes.
But we're still working on it.
Yes.
And that means also hello to everybody on Zoom. So welcome to this day beyond fossil fuels, just transition in California and Germany. My name is Max Grünig with Pocasito, and I'm going to try to moderate together with my colleague Brendan O'Donnell here this event. And Stephen, thank you so much for having us here today.
Of course.
This is really a fabulous comeback to the Clean Tech Incubator. And thank you for hosting us here.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm super excited. This is the first time we have had anything inside of this space in almost 2 years. So this is a truly remarkable experience to be in front of everyone in person. So for those that don't know too much about LACI or the LaCrest Innovation Campus, LaCrest Innovation Campus and LACI together manage this beautiful space, 60,000 square feet, where you can imagine ecosystem of government and politics, entrepreneurs, and clean tech all come together to figure out how to build a more cleaner, inclusive green economy here. The space is really, really great, and we're so happy to have you. I'll be bouncing in and out for today, and just really, really want to make sure that you guys have a great session today. So thank you.
We're going to go to our first, our second welcoming remarks. So thank you, Stephen. And the next welcoming remarks come from the sponsor for the event. So this is made possible through the generous support of the German Foreign Office. And we're very glad to have the German Foreign Office represented here by the Consul General for the Federal Republic of Germany in Los Angeles, Stefan Schneider. Thank you very much for joining us here today. It's a real pleasure to work with you again. And even though it's still different from what it used to be, we're trying to do the best of it. And thank you for making it possible to discuss just transition approaches in Germany and California. So if you want to, you can now address the audience in the room and on Zoom. Thank you so much.
That's where you are.
Yes, perfect. You can stand here. You can also walk around if you grab
just stay here.
Wonderful.
Good morning, everybody. Max Grünig, thank you very much for everything. We are very glad to have you here in LA. And just, LA is a place of climate change, and they have a new Green Deal, we all know. And every day, at a daily basis, we are experiencing the problems between climate and mobility. So I think we are at the right place here. And it is not just a problem of Los Angeles, it's a worldwide problem. We have a COP26 now going on in Glasgow, and I think they have the last day today, or they might extend their meetings to tomorrow. I don't know. There's probably a necessity to do so. And then what we are doing here, and I really like that we are getting together here. I just discussed with some of the wonderful guests we have here that it is very important also not talking about just visions for climate change, but also about implementation and monitoring of the realization of the vision we all do have. And frankly speaking, I very often read documents, political documents, everywhere. They talk about visions. I always expect there should be also part of implementation, regular implementation, monitoring. And so what we are doing here, we're giving inspiration. You all need inspiration. And I really like there are people present here, independent counseling people. They are not linked to government. And I always think as a government official, it is important that civil society is a part of the climate change thing. It's everybody, it's every individual. It is not up to the state to say, you have to take care of the climate change, you as an individual. No, it is a partnership between civil society, and the state, any public authority to work together and let in science and really try also to avoid and to fight false narratives or wrong facts. This is very important. When it comes to climate change, we read theories, we couldn't believe it, and a lack of technological knowledge we read every day on social media. It's up to you really to combat that, but also to explain that not always scientifically, but also to bring it to the people, to make the civil society a part of the whole experience. So it starts by thinking, do I take the car today? Or do I take the bus? But you have also to ask your authority, your community, do you provide a bus system? Do you provide a network that enables me not to use fossil energy? So it's very important. Some people, they're driving around the poodle in the SUV just to get the nails done. The same people are for climate change. Fine. They should really be very strict with themselves and starting by themselves. Same as the political area. When they are traveling with delegations, they should think about it. Is it really necessary to take away? I could talk for hours because I'm very much this issue is so important, not only for me as an official of my country, but also as a private person. So I always say, civil society and state should go together and achieve what we are going to do. Not only visions, not only having visions, but also implement them, monitor them, and go ahead. Thank you very much. I wish you a great presentation. I look forward. I'm here to learn, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Consul General Stefan Schneider. Thank you for these opening remarks, also like giving the bigger picture, which is also the smaller picture, right? So it's both what's being done at the government level and also what we do personally, individually. And of course, also what we support, what our actions are. And now I want to introduce our next opening speaker, Gero from the LA County, the Chief Sustainability Officer for LA County. It's a real pleasure to meet you again. We met 4 years ago, I believe. First time back then, the focus was on water, which is also an kind of an, well, easy topic to pick here. But of course, these things are also related. Water is related to energy because for one, in thermal power plants, you need water for cooling, but also for water, we need a lot of energy. People often don't realize that. When you turn on the faucet, you also use a lot of electrons to get it there, especially here, since a lot of water comes from further away. And LA County is a front runner in sustainability matters, but also specifically in the question and the topic of our conversation today, just transition. So that's why I thought I really have to try to get you here. And thank you for making this possible. And thank you for joining us here today. Gary.
I'll go back here so I can put my notes on. Well, thank you, Consul General, for being here today, and to Max for inviting me. I'm really honored and appreciate the opportunity to talk about the work that we're doing in the County of Los Angeles. Let me start, though, how we always start, which is to do a land acknowledgement, to honor and recognize the first people of these lands that are unceded. And these are the unceded territories of Los Angeles County. With respect to their elders, past and present, we recognize the Tongva, the Tatavam, the Gabrielino Kish, and the Chumash. Many of whom are still with us here today and are part of our community, and we commit ourselves to uplifting their stories and their culture. So before we talk about beyond fossil fuels, how we get there and the just transition, maybe take just a moment to talk about why. Because I think it's always important to be grounded in the mission and the purpose of the actions that you're going to take. And of course, here in Los Angeles, I was born and raised here. I know firsthand the air pollution that existed in the 60s and 70s, saw the power of government action to help reduce that pollution. We're not there yet. We still suffer from unhealthful air quality. But this is important to get to an answer on air pollution, because it is our Black and our Latinx communities that are most disproportionately affected. And just as a way of a statistic, 25% of Black children in Los Angeles suffer from childhood asthma. That is 3 times the rate of white children, who suffer at about an 8% rate. And that's not because of some inherent defect in Black children's bodies. It's exactly and precisely because of the way we have designed our communities and put toxic facilities in Black and brown communities. And there's an ongoing history, a legacy of racist actions by government and by the private sector, things like exclusionary zoning and redlining that have led to these kinds of outcomes. We recently completed our countywide climate vulnerability assessment, and we looked at social vulnerability, populations that are vulnerable to climate hazards, whether it's heat or flooding or drought or wildfire or sea level rise. And another startling statistic, perhaps, is that while the Latinx population is half of LA County, if you look at the census tracts that are going to be most impacted by extreme heat, the Latin population makes up 2/3 of the population there. So we've made communities that are less resilient to the kinds of climate change impacts we're going to see. There are communities without tree canopy, communities without parks, communities with a lot of hard surfaces. And heat, quite frankly, is a killer. Heat kills more people every year than any other weather-related phenomena. So this is something that we are taking seriously, we have to take seriously. And part of taking that seriously, of course, is addressing the fundamental problem of climate change by moving beyond fossil fuels, but we also have to prepare our communities and have to improve our communities. So how do we get there? That's always the good question, right? The phrase that I hear a lot, and I've been to many COPs, I'm glad not to be in Glasgow this year, but is that there are no silver bullets. There's no one solution that's going to solve climate change for us. It really is, as they say, silver buckshot. And so there's lots and lots of little solutions that we need to implement to add up. But there are some big things that we can do. And in a place like LA County, where 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions are associated with just 3 sectors, we know those are the sectors we need to target. We're at 42% of our emissions are from transportation. Yes, LA is a car culture, right? So we burn a lot of fossil fuels in transportation. Buildings are about 28%, so lights, heating and cooling. And then energy production itself is about 10%. So we're tackling all of those in LA County. Let me start with energy production as the first place. 3 years ago, the county established a new electric utility in Los Angeles and Ventura called the Clean Power Alliance. It's comprised of 32 jurisdictions, and it is providing power to 3 million people in Southern California. It is the nation's largest provider of 100% renewable energy to customers. 850,000 people are getting 100% renewable energy every day. And that's in 15 of the 32 cities that are part of it. And we're hopeful that another million or more next year will convert to 100%. LA County in the unincorporated areas, there's that 50% renewable energy, but we want to move that to 100 as well, and we expect to do that next year. The Clean Power Alliance has invested $3 billion in solar, wind, and storage. In fact, is one of the largest procurers of battery storage in California. And all of that adds up to some 2,500 new clean energy jobs. So that's how you get to the energy production side. On transportation, it's great that we're actually here at the LA Clean Tech Incubator, because the LA Clean Tech Incubator established what's called the Transportation Electrification Partnership just a couple of years ago. We are a founding member of that, along with the City of Los Angeles and LA DWP and Southern California Edison. But this is a unique partnership. It includes the state of California, includes the transportation agency here, but it also includes the private sector, companies like BYD, which builds electric buses. BMW has been a huge supporter of it and is committed to zero emission transportation. And so we brought all of these folks together to actually establish a roadmap. And as you walk into the facility here, you see the LA Clean Tech Incubator's Transportation Electrification Partnership roadmap, which has a vision that by the time of the 2028 Olympics, a visitor coming to Los Angeles could get from the airport to all of the Olympic venues completely in electric transportation, from the bus, the rail, and from shared ride services like Uber and Lyft. So we're getting there. Clean transportation is just one piece. We actually have 3 electric bus manufacturers here, but we want Los Angeles to be the new Detroit, if you will, of the electric transportation future. Then we need to get to buildings, and building decarbonization is one of the hardest things we can do. Of course, in a place like Los Angeles, we're already fully built out or largely fully built out. So how do you retrofit? How do you start to actually decommission and take natural gas systems out of the neighborhoods and out of communities? We're working now with RAND Corporation on a study on exactly how do we do this? How do we start to decommission? And we'll start at a neighborhood scale. We're looking at some neighborhoods that might be suitable. One of the astounding facts about California is that our natural gas infrastructure is among the oldest in the country. We're at 47 years on average for our natural gas infrastructure, tied with West Virginia. So the question for us as a society is, do we invest in new natural gas infrastructure as this infrastructure is starting to age out, or do we convert? Do we move on to an electric future? And I think the answer is pretty clear. We can't keep investing in fossil fuel infrastructure that's going to last for 30, 40, 50 years. And then the last piece is actually just leaving oil in the ground. And our Board of Supervisors in September adopted a motion saying, 1, we're not going to allow any new oil drilling in LA County. And 2, we're going to declare all of the existing oil wells to be legally non-conforming and shut them down within 5 years. This is a community, this is a city, this is a county that was founded on oil. The oil industry was here before the movie industry, before the aerospace industry, before any others. This is an oil town, and we are taking steps now to actually eliminate oil. We have the largest urban oil field in the nation, which means that we've got thousands of wells in people's backyards. And you know who those people are? Again, they're Black and Latinx communities that are primarily living next to our oil infrastructure. But the board actually did 2 things in September when it took that action. It said, we want to shut these things down. We want to leave that oil in the ground, but we're worried about the workers. We think that the people in the fossil fuel industry deserve a transition to good, clean jobs. And they put my office in charge of a just transition task force. And we actually had the first meeting of that task force just last week. And we brought together the owners of the oil fields, labor unions, frontline communities that are living next to the oil fields, environmental justice communities, academics, and government agencies. And this is co-hosted now with the city of Los Angeles. And we're going to find a way to actually proactively develop a strategy to help transition the workers who drill, operate, and maintain oil wells in LA County. So we're not just making this transition and leaving them to fend for themselves. And the board was very clear that that was important. So let me just wrap up here by saying, you know, I get asked, why are we taking such aggressive action here in Los Angeles? Why should we put ourselves out in front and take the risks and disrupt our economy, quite honestly, when others aren't? Why don't we wait for the nations of the world at Glasgow at the COP to show leadership, and we can benefit from that? And my response to that, quite frankly, is LA County is a nation unto itself. In fact, our economy is so big, we would be a member of the G20 if we were a nation. We have an economy that is just tremendously huge, and we have a responsibility because of our history of emissions from this region. But the main reason that we do it is that we know this economic transformation is coming, and we can either be a leader or a lagger. We want that transformation here in LA County for all the reasons I mentioned at the beginning, to address our air quality problems, to address the impacts of climate change in our region. And if we take that leadership and grab that future clean economy, we're actually going to be better off as a society. So that's why we're doing it. And I think it really comes down to three things, which are the very core of sustainability, which is we're doing it for the environment, we're doing it for equity, because we have to address those disproportionate impacts, and we're doing it for the economy. So with that, I'll conclude and say thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
If you are
If there are
up
questions,
for it,
sure.
yes, maybe there are questions. Maybe we have questions in the room or on Zoom. We can see, please put your questions in the chat, and we have a question here in the room. And if you want to speak towards that little plate and you can introduce yourself real quick, then we should, I mean, we can hear you anyway, but they should be able to hear you.
I'll try to talk really loudly.
That's perfect. That's probably fine. That's probably good.
So thank you very much. Wendy Nation, Environmental Social Justice. Quick question, infrastructure. How do you feel about green hydrogen?
How do I feel about green hydrogen? I think it still has to prove itself. I don't know that it exists. I don't think it's economic, quite frankly, at this stage. And I don't think it can be produced in the volumes necessary to actually serve as a primary fuel in our economy. I think there are always going to be applications for gaseous fuels. Aviation is an obvious one, maybe some super heavy duty equipment. But as a day-by-day fuel for either transportation or for heating in homes, I don't think green hydrogen makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary. Mark Bernstein, doing sustainability for a long time. One of the issues that keeps coming up on the shift to electricity is the electricity infrastructure and whether it can handle it. What's the role of the county, and what type of investments can it be made as we, and I think we should shift natural gas to electricity and have electric vehicles, but the current grid can't handle it. So what needs to happen to go to the plan?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we can't transition to a largely electrified economy without a significant investment in electrical infrastructure. As you know, today, grid reliability is a significant issue. We have public safety power shutoff events that occur regularly, possibly even on a day like today when we have high Santa Ana winds. And so it is critical that we address this. The role of the county, unfortunately, is relatively minimal with that. But we have been advocating for both state and federal money to go towards upgrading the grid. You know, utilities traditionally have funded this through ratepayer or through the ratepayer built into your electricity rates. I don't think that that's adequate. I don't think we can completely do the kind of transformation that we need to do because it would result in a raising of rates on a order of, you know, at least 20%, maybe more, maybe 50%, which just is not sustainable or tenable, especially for lower income customers. So we really need to find government investment in things like the Build Back Better package that President Biden is pushing. Within that is in money for electrical infrastructure upgrades. The state of California had a huge budget surplus this year. We advocated that some of that money go for supporting our electrical infrastructure as well.
Now, Todd Sostek, I'm retired from SoCal Gas Company. What do you mean by non-conforming wells? Are they somehow leaking more compared to a new well? I'm not sure what that means.
What the Board of Supervisors directed was that all oil wells, regardless of their operational status, be declared non-conforming under the zoning code so that they could be shut down. So it simply means that they don't conform to zoning.
To zoning.
Yep.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm Brendan O'Donnell. I'm with Cocosito. Thank you very much for that talk and congratulations on really great steps that the county seems to be making. I'm very excited to hear about this new committee on just transition. So eager to see what develops from that, how that moves forward. When you talked so nicely about both the systemic issues, inequities that are established by the existing fossil fuel systems in our society, but then also the potential economic loss for certain communities with the transition. This is an idea of a just transition. Unfortunately, in a lot of discourses, these two communities are pitted against each other, where we say the health impacts on the systemic impact are measured against the potential economic loss of the other. What is your committee doing? What can the county do to bring these constituencies together to see that for both communities, this is actually the best way forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and really important that we, as we think about how do we make this transition, how do we ensure that the communities, one, that are most directly impacted by this kind of infrastructure benefit, which goes to the question of what happens to those oil fields after they've been shut down? What is the right reuse? Do we make them into parks, or do we build housing, or they become commercial developments? And to do that, you really need to talk to the people on the ground in the neighborhoods. And so that's why we actually have what we call frontline community members represented on this Just Transition Task Force. And I started with the land acknowledgement. We also we invited all of the tribal nations of LA County into this group to say, again, these are your lands. As we think about the reuse of this land, is there an opportunity to restore or to return land to tribal nations? That's a huge lift, and it hasn't been done before. But we do have an example here in LA, or just recently, of returning land to its rightful owners, which is Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach, where the government had taken land from a Black family, ostensibly to create a park, really to evict them from that land, and now have given that land back, or in the process of giving that land back. So that establishes a precedent. But you know, the fossil fuel industry jobs are also really good jobs for the most part. You can work at a refinery with a high school education and make well over $100,000. And you can't tell somebody at a refinery, we're gonna get you a job on a wind farm or building solar at a quarter of the wages. It just doesn't work that way. And so we really need to think about, how do we create well-paying, family-sustaining jobs for the people that are going to be affected by this transition?
Oh, yes, please. On the line for space, yeah, turn it up. Can I just take my mask off?
Sure.
So, yeah, so like jumping off of what you were saying about what can we make, and like what can we bring in money with, pretty much? What can we provide? What kind of jobs can we provide to kind of compete with this fossil fuel jobs? So, going back to infrastructure, do you feel like there's a future in hempcrete or like some other form that we could like throw money in and like fund more projects on?
You know, this is where the role of government is, how do I put this? We're not very good at what's called industrial policy, which is sort of directing how the economy should grow. We can certainly put investments in sectors that we think are critical, and we are doing some of that. But we don't typically like to pick winners and losers, whether it's hempcrete or some other carbon stored concrete. So I guess what I will say, though, is where we build infrastructure, we build things like wastewater treatment plants, we build stormwater capture systems, you know, we build the highways, of course, and the subways and all of that. And so where we're making direct investments, I think we do have an opportunity to ensure that those are union, well-paying family jobs, and we can tell somebody at a refinery whose skills are very similar to the skills in operating a wastewater treatment plant. Lots of pipes, lots of valves, lots of flanges, all that kind of stuff. Knowing how to do that. And if we're gonna, as Max started with the notion of water, if we're really gonna address our water crisis, we actually need to not be throwing water out into the Pacific Ocean every single day. We need to be taking that wastewater and putting it back into the system. And to do that, we're gonna need a lot higher level of water treatment and a lot more water treatment. And so I think there are opportunities where we as a government can invest in jobs that will sustain people who are transitioning out of fossil fuels that way. Sure.
Great. Gary, thank you for taking some more questions.
Of course.
Let's give you another round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your vision for a just transition in LA County. And feel free to stick around.